Hi, I'm Jeremy, the Zoo Nerd, coming to you live from my backyard in Los Angeles, California. How is everyone doing today? I hope you're well, I hope you're happy, healthy, and having some fun. If you saw the photos I posted earlier in the little video, if you looked on Instagram, you would have seen some animals called peccaries. They are often mistaken for pigs, and they look quite a bit like pigs, but they in fact are not. I'll explain in today's Critter Chat about peccaries. So at first glance, these animals look like they are pigs. They have a very similar shaped snout or nose with a flat end. It's very mobile. They can move it around a lot. They use it in the same way that pigs use their snout to dig around for roots and for other food items that they eat. Both pigs and peccaries are ungulates or hoofed animals. They both have even numbers of toes. For them, they both have 4 toes on each little hoof. So that puts them in the order of mammals called Artiodactylae. That's a huge order. It includes many animals like camels, giraffes, hippos, deer, cows, wild cattle, bison, antelope, and of course the pigs and the peccaries. They actually have their own suborder called Suinae, and that's because they're kind of different from all those many animals that I listed. Most of those animals have long legs. Most of those animals have kind of horns or antlers or ossicones. Most of those animals can be very large. And most of those animals kind of have a similar-ish body shape. And the pigs and the peccaries, although different than the rest of those guys, kind of have a lot in common. For starters, they are omnivores. Omnivore means many foods. They'll eat almost everything. They eat mostly plant matter, so leaves, roots, twigs, berries, fruits, nuts, flowers, all those good things. But they will also eat some animal matter. So occasionally they'll eat some bugs, they'll eat some bird eggs, they'll eat small animals like mice or lizards. They'll also sometimes eat dead animals. And that's true with pigs and with peccaries. It's not very common that we see it, but it does happen. They're kind of opportunistic, so if there's food around that's an animal, they'll eat it. In addition to that, separating them from the rest of those other guys like the camels, the deer, the antelopes, and all that, both pigs and peccaries have kind of large heads for their body size. They have short and thick necks. Most of those other guys have long necks. Think about camels, giraffes, deer. They also have kind of barrel-shaped bodies. They're pretty rotund, which is kind of common with hippos, but kind of against most of those others. They also have shorter legs, so they're pretty low to the ground. And then, of course, they both have that flexible snout that they can move around and dig with. The end of their nose is made of cartilage, so the same thing that our ears and our nose is made out of, that is the same with both pigs and peccaries. So that is their suborder Suinae. And then it breaks down into the family level as scientists classify animals. And the pigs are called Suidae, and they come from the Old World. They are in Asia, Europe, and Africa. But they've been introduced to many of the other parts of the world, including many of the islands. There's some pigs actually that are called feral pigs that are here in the US. Wild pigs that you may see in like Florida or Arkansas, Alabama, things called razorbacks. Those are all descendants from domestic pigs that then were let loose or escaped and are running around. So those are true pigs. They typically have teeth or canine teeth that grow out as tusks. They grow out at an angle, sometimes up, sometimes down, sometimes going backwards, sometimes get curly. And then they have kind of upright, pointy ears. Think if you were drawing a pig, you'd draw a triangle-shaped ear. They also have pretty long tails. The domesticated pigs have curly tails. Wild pigs don't. And those tails sometimes are long with some hair on the end. Peccaries are in a different family. So they are in the family called Teasudae, and they are New World. They are from the Americas, North America and South America. Although fossils of peccaries can also be found in Europe, Asia, and Africa, so they did exist there at one time. There used to be a land bridge connecting Alaska to Russia, and many animals in the Ice Age time transversed that area and traveled between the Americas and Asia. Things like camels, things like cheetahs, things like tapirs, many different animals used that land bridge. Ancestors of elephants, mammoths, mastodons, all of those kind of animals traveled over that land bridge, including both pigs and peccaries. However, after that Ice Age ended, the peccaries that were in Europe, Asia, and Africa died out. The peccaries that were in the Americas prospered and thrived. And there are now 3 species of peccaries. We'll talk about each of those in just a bit. With peccaries, the biggest difference between a peccary and a pig is if you look closely at their mouth shape and their teeth. Peccaries' teeth are a little more in straight lines, and their canines, or their pointy teeth, the ones that we use to like bite meat, those pointy teeth grow more up and down. In fact, they kind of interlock on a peccary, making their mouth go only up and down. Most of the other mouths of many of those animals, like the pigs, the camels, the giraffes, they can kind of chew in a circular motion, with the top jaw holding still and the bottom jaw kind of moving around like this. Peccaries can only go like this. So they have teeth that stick out of their mouth, kind of like their pig cousins, but they only grow up and down. They don't really curl out. They don't. They're not as obvious. They're not as big, and they can only go up and down. But that allows them to eat big nuts, particularly the ones in South America. Eat something called a palm nut, which is a big, nice nut off of a palm tree. They're one of the few animals that can eat that, but they have incredible jaw strength because their jaw only moves up and down. They also have more rounded ears, and their ears are a little lower on their side, whereas pigs' ears are a little more up top. Peccaries are more on the side. And their tails are pretty minimal. They're pretty short. You have to look really close to see their tails. And in general, their bodies are pretty hairy, with very coarse, wiry hair. Although some pigs also have that, many do not. So kind of like pigs, they also do some of the same things. One is use that nose to look for food that's buried underground. Things like roots, seeds, nuts. They'll kind of dig with that nose. It's kind of like a shovel. It's very tough skin, but it's very flexible, has good muscles behind it, and it allows them to be very good diggers. In that digging for food, they also sometimes make something called a wallow. A wallow is a shallow hole that sometimes fills with water if it rains, or if you're a very nice zookeeper and you put water in it for them to play in. And then they love to roll around in that mud. The video I posted earlier today shows that, and I'll be posting more videos of peccaries in mud later on. So wallowing is also very important because it actually creates little water holes for a lot of different animals. And many of the peccaries that live in Central and South America are actually very important to their environment, because many other animals depend on those little watering holes as a place where they can live or where they can get a drink. There's actually multiple species of frogs that breed, reproduce, and have their babies in the wallows made by peccaries. So they are very important to their habitat. In addition to that, with the plants that they eat a lot of seeds and nuts, and sometimes the fruits, which also contain seeds. And then as they walk around looking for more food, they poop, and in that poop there's more seeds that then grow and help spread out those plants. In one study that they did, I believe it was in Bolivia, in South America, they studied 2 different kinds of peccaries that live there, and the one kind ate over 120 different species of plants. The other one ate over 140. So they eat a wide variety of different things, and they're very important seed dispersers. With peccaries, they typically live in a herd, and that is for safety. The different species kind of live in different size herds, with the Chacoan peccaries living in the smallest herds of less than 20 individuals. The Javalinas, or collared peccaries, they typically live between 20 and 50 individuals in a herd. And the white-lipped peccaries, they're the ones that are darker with a little bit of white on their face. They can live into huge herds, multiple hundreds of animals at a time. Now, in their herd mentality, they sometimes rely on each other for safety. So one, that's a lot more ears listening for danger and noses smelling for danger, because they don't have very good eyesight. That's common across all peccaries. Really good sense of smell, really good hearing, not so great vision. But if they smell or hear a predator, they'll let out a little noise that lets everybody know. They will typically run from a predator or all come together and try to protect the babies and the younger ones, and sometimes even try to chase a predator away. If they're in a big group, they can be very successful. Even big things like jaguars will run away from a big herd of white-lipped peccaries. It's been documented several times. They'll sometimes snarl and kind of growl at the predator, and they'll sometimes mash their very strong jaws up and down to kind of scare that potential predator away. What else? Oh, yeah, with their vision being pretty limited and their sense of smell being highly developed, they rely on their sense of smell to communicate with each other. They do this through scent marking. So they have very specialized scent glands kind of along the back of their back and near their rear end that create a very stinky smell to what we would call stinky. But for them, it's very important. So when two peccaries meet, they'll smell each other, and then they'll line up side by side with this one's nose being by this one's rear end and vice versa. And they'll rub against each other and kind of share that scent gland with each other to kind of help form a bond or a relationship. Now that doesn't mean that they're gonna necessarily mate or have babies or anything like that, because they are very communal. In their herds, it's multiple males, multiple females. Everybody can breed with everybody, and there's no tight family bond. So if this female bred with this male last year and they had some kids together, she took care of them entirely. And maybe this next season she'll breed with this male over here. So that is very, very common in their herd. So let's talk a little bit about the three different species of peccary. In the photos I posted on social media earlier today, the first photo is called a collared peccary, also called a javalina. They live in parts of the United States, so they are today's featured American animal, although all of these animals are American animals, North and South America. Collared peccaries also live in Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, and then down through Mexico, down through Central America, and into the northern half of South America, going into Brazil, maybe into Bolivia, Venezuela, Colombia, all of those areas. In general, collared peccaries are the smallest of the three peccary species. They're typically only get about 42 inches in length, so that's about 3.5 feet, so that's still pretty good size. Only about 20 inches tall, so they're the shortest, and they weigh between 33 and 62 pounds. That's a pretty big weight range, and there are some individuals that have been bigger that they've seen in Peru and in Arizona. So sometimes they, if conditions are right, they can get quite a bit bigger, maybe even up to 90 pounds. The white-lipped peccaries, those are our second species. They are the ones in the second photo on Instagram and Facebook. They're kind of darker in color. They have a little bit of white on the side of their face. And they are the longest. They can get up to 55 inches in length, so that's about 4.5 feet. They're about 24 inches tall, so just a little bit taller than their cousins, but quite a bit longer. And they'll weigh between 55 and 80 pounds. These are the ones that live in the biggest herds, and they typically live in the tropical rainforest, through kind of southern Mexico, throughout Central America, and throughout the area of the Amazon. So Brazil, Peru, some of those other countries that are kind of in that northern South America area. Now that means that those two species, the collared peccary and the white-lipped peccary, live in some of the same habitat. That's kind of important because they wondered if for a while if they were the same species, but then they figured out, oh, this one's kind of shorter, this one's kind of has darker hair, this one grows longer. All of those things came into play. White-lipped peccaries, the more jungle-dwelling ones, are listed as vulnerable to extinction. The collared peccaries, or the javalinas, are listed as least concern. There's actually quite a good number of them. Their population is stable, and in places like Arizona, they're actually expanding their range. When people first moved to Arizona in the 1800s, there were some javalinas in very southern Arizona, and over time they've started moving further and further north. And recently they've spotted them almost as far north as the Grand Canyon, so they continue to move a little further as their population stabilizes in Arizona. They're probably doing the same things in New Mexico and Texas as well, although my experience doesn't lend me to speaking about that, but they are definitely expanding in Arizona. So our third species of peccary, and if you saw the video on Instagram, it wouldn't let me share it to Facebook for some reason today, but the video that was the third image on the Instagram post, those are Chacoan peccaries. They're the tallest, and they live in a more dry habitat. So they live in a dry grassland habitat in the middle of South America. So they live only in 3 countries, Paraguay, Bolivia, and Argentina. Their drier grassland area is called the Chaco. It's a very important ecological area. It's a grassland south of the Amazon, so it gets less rainfall. And it's a very important ecological area because there's a lot of animals that rely on that habitat, and that habitat is greatly threatened. With Chacoan peccaries, they actually thought they were extinct. They had found old bones and some fossils, but they thought they were gone. Nobody had seen live ones for a long time. Until 1972, they found a small population of them living in Bolivia. And during the years since then, they've expanded a little bit and found more of them living in some areas that they hadn't fully looked before. And so they are still listed as endangered because there's not very many of them, and that habitat is very threatened. They can be about 46 inches long, so they're kind of in the middle lengthwise, but they're the tallest of the 3 species, coming in about 27 inches tall. And they can be some of the heaviest, weighing between 65 and 88 pounds. Now, when they rediscovered them and they realized there weren't very many, the governments of the area where they lived, Bolivia, Paraguay, and Argentina, decided that they should try to protect these animals. And there were some conservationists involved who decided that they wanted to try to help out. And so they enlisted the help of zoos in the United States to try to help out. And so the zoos in the Association of Zoos and Aquariums created something called a species survival plan to help these animals breed in captivity, and they've done very well. Unfortunately, Chacoan peccaries only survive in the right kind of climates, so not all zoos could really participate, although many zoos have tried. They do better in zoos in the western United States, where things are a little drier, and they have warmer temperatures kind of year-round. So kind of the northern states are out of the question because it gets too cold, and the eastern states are a little bit out of the question because it gets too wet. So they thrive in the western U.S. zoos. So San Diego Zoo, Los Angeles Zoo, Phoenix Zoo are 3 zoos that have been very important with the Chacoan peccary breeding program in U.S. zoos. And they've made a huge difference in helping Chacoan peccaries breed and thrive in zoos for about 40 years. In addition to that, they've helped create a very special program down in the home range countries of Bolivia, Argentina, and Paraguay. And that program is called Proyecto Tagua. They're sometimes called Tagua is another name for this species. And Proyecto Tagua does a lot of really great conservation work to help the Chacoan peccaries out. I'll be posting some more information about that organization later today, but they are making a lot of progress. The major threats for peccaries, first is hunting. They're hunted a lot for their skins and for their meat. In some places, they are hunted in the United States. The javalinas are hunted in Arizona and I believe in Texas. Those populations are stable, so it's maybe not a bad idea for some hunting. But in places like Argentina and Bolivia, where the endangered Chacoan peccaries live, that is a very risky thing that is happening. And although they're protected in those ranges, they are still hunted in those spaces, which is not a very feasible way to keep them alive as a species. I wanted to talk a little bit about peccary babies. I think that they're some of the cutest babies animals out there. I'll be posting hopefully some video of peccary babies later today. For all three species, their gestation is roughly 150 days, a little longer or a little shorter depending on the species. They typically have 2 or 3 babies. The babies can be up and running within a couple of hours, and they look just like the big ones, but little bitty. So they typically weigh between 1 and 2, maybe 3 pounds at the biggest at birth, and they can run within a couple of hours. So they're super, super cute. They usually stay right by their mom's side for the first couple of weeks, and then they'll start to get a little more ambitious and exploring as they get a little bit older and bigger. They grow pretty quick, and usually by the time they are 2 years old, they're able to reproduce on their own. Now, peccaries can typically live into their late teens in the wild. In a zoo setting, they can live into their mid to late 20s because they don't have predators. They get veterinary care if they get sick or injured. I always like to talk a bit about my experiences with the animals that I'm talking about. And with peccaries, I am very excited because I have worked with them fairly closely. During my time at the Phoenix Zoo, we had both the collared peccary, which is the javalina, the ones that live wild in Arizona, and we also had Chacoan peccaries. As an educator at the Phoenix Zoo, I spent some time helping people watch them and teaching people about them. And it was very fun to do so. Later, after I moved to Los Angeles and became a zookeeper at the LA Zoo, Chacoan peccaries lived at the LA Zoo, and they were one of the species that I was lucky to be a part of in taking care of them. They were super cool to work with. I always called them fake pigs because essentially that's what they are. And it really made me very happy when I could give them things like mud wallows when it was warm, and I could fill some of those shallow areas with some water and make mud wallows for them. They really seemed to enjoy it. I also loved feeding them. They were very excited for their food and would usually kind of gather in like a semicircle around me as I would toss out fruits and vegetables to them. We fed them things like kale, lettuce, squash, carrots, and sweet potatoes, and they really loved all of those things. We would also sometimes cut branches for them off of the trees nearby where they lived, and they would also sometimes eat some cactus. Coming from dry places and living in desert areas, they're very good at eating cactus and would sometimes nibble on the cactus that grew in their exhibits. The third species, the white-lipped peccary, I've only seen in one zoo, and I went all the way to Europe to see them, and they were in the zoo in Berlin. That's where I took the photo that is on the social media post earlier today. And I'm very excited that I've seen all 3 species, and they are very cool animals. I encourage you to learn a little more about peccaries with the information I shared later today on the Facebook page. That concludes what I have to share about peccaries today. I hope you've enjoyed what I've shared with you. And as always, feel free to like, follow, subscribe, and share any of my content across the platforms Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, as well as my website at jeremythezoonerd.com. Until tomorrow, be happy, be healthy, be safe. See you then. Bye.